Joshua 2 is where we're going to land today. This is where we have been so far. We've talked about blood. Last week, let me just pick it up from last week. It was the point when the children of Israel were going to be delivered from the Egyptians, and the instructions that God gave the children of Israel, this is in Exodus 12-ish, around that ballpark. He says, go out and get a lamb and slaughter it, catch some of its blood in a basin, and then wipe that blood on the doorposts and the lintels. It seems strange, right? But nonetheless, those were the instructions. And stay inside the house throughout the night. Anybody that goes out of the house, it's on you. And so wipe the blood on the doorposts and the lintels, and then stay inside. And so the next morning was tremendous wailing and weeping and this devastating scene of the firstborn struck down, and of all the Egyptians and anybody else that didn't do this, their firstborn was struck down by the destroyer. I'm not going to go into the theological explanation of all of that. I'm just going to leave it there. From there, the children of Israel go, 3 million and some change, leave Egypt. Imagine that scene. Home after home after home that had blood poured on it, on the door frames and everything, and they gone. Like it's a ghost town in those communities. Imagine what that would feel like, how the housing market was then, okay? They land in the wilderness for 40 years because of their disbelief that they could go into the promised land. Now think about this. Let's just talk about this practically. If you have 3 million people undeniably delivered from a body of people, from the Egyptians, that would get talked about. The 10 plagues that got poured out, the miraculous deliverance, the splitting of the Red Sea, those things would be talked about, especially if the children of Israel landed in the wilderness for 40 years. So the world still turned. There was still trade and commerce and economics and all that kind of stuff was still happening. And so there were still produce being grown in Egypt, and they were still trading in going to different parts of the land, but just in a different way, a more hindered way. And so as people came in and out of Egypt and they saw these vacant homes, I would imagine that when they went back to their hometown with their goods, they would be like, y'all are not going to, they were all Southern, y'all are not going to believe this, but like several million homes are vacated, and we had to go through the way where they made their way through the wilderness, and they are leaving a trail. By the way, there's some mysterious rock that is pouring out water. Never seen that before. And then we were kind of around them one night, and I'm not kidding you, bread from heaven is happening. And then there's this pillar of smoke and pillar of fire, depending on if it's day or night. That stuff is happening to these people. Those kind of reports were getting sent out and spread around over the course of those 40 years. Moses is dead now. And the reason why I'm so drawn to Joshua is because that's my full name. I'm named after that person in the Bible. And I found that the same words that God spoke to Joshua early on, I've gone back to Joshua 1 for my own need, for God to say, be strong and courageous. Do not fear. Be strong and courageous. Do not fear. Don't let the book of the law depart from your mouth, but meditate on it day and night. I've got it in here because I've needed it throughout the course of my life. God is so blatantly just in your face with Joshua. He's like, Joshua, Moses is dead. You're looking at his dead body. I'm not going to resurrect him. Okay, I'm saving that for later. So you're it. You're the leader. I've needed God to speak to me that obvious in my life. We're at similar timing. I just love how God is a God of the details. Moments before what we read happens, like it actually happens, the children of Israel, 40 years after their deliverance from Egypt, were observing the Passover. You can't tell me that God doesn't pay attention to the details. So they observed the Passover. Joshua sent, prior to the Passover, Joshua sent some spies into Jericho. They have made their way through the wilderness and into some land, and they are at the point of entering into the Promised Land. Now, something that we need to understand about the region that they were going into is that they were not following Yahweh. They were not following the one true God. They were not following the God that says, I am. They were following gods, lowercase g. One of them, the name is Asherah, and she was the god of war and the god of love, and depending on what region you went to, she was also the god of fertility. Their statue of her was literally, they call them Asherah poles, and it was these poles that had a carven image of a naked woman. Some of the imagery, she was pregnant. Some of her features were very well elaborated on and accentuated. And they would construct those throughout the land, and they worshipped her. There was another god who was a predominant god, and his name is Baal, or Baal, depending on how you prefer to pronounce it. The idea was, in these different regions, these pagan regions, is that Baal and Asherah would have sex and create other gods. Now, how that played out in the practical day of living is men would conjure in their mind these fantasies, and they would carry out these sexual acts with temple prostitutes, and that was their way of being in this sex dance with Baal and Asherah. It was very twisted and very gross, very degrading. We live in this whole thing, in this world of like injustices and everything. Y'all, I don't know that we fully get injustice because we didn't live during these days. This is crazy. These are temple prostitutes, and I can't even fathom what was done to them, right? So that's the realm that they lived in. That's the reality that they lived in. They worshiped these gods and gave credit to these gods and bowed down to these gods. That's the pagan land that the children of Israel are now going into. The children of Israel could not be more of a polar opposite than this. They were the ones set apart to be a holy nation, a royal priesthood, pure, blameless, spotless, right? And now they are going into the Promised Land where all of that other stuff is going. Simultaneously, throughout those 40 years, words of this mysterious one God doing all of these powerful acts within this body of people, they are making their way through the land. When they move, the dust rises, and we see the millions making their way to our territory. Their first stop, Jericho, situated 825 feet below the sea level. It is the lowest city in the world. It's kind of strange, though, that it also, at that time, probably had the highest walls, fortified walls of any city. And we'll get to that in a minute. We pick up in Joshua chapter 2. Joshua, the son of Nun, secretly sent out 2 men as spies from the Acacia Grove. If you don't have Acacia Grove, you have another word that I'm thankful I don't have to read. Those of you that have that one, you guys can chuckle. Anyways, and he says this, go out and scout the land, especially Jericho. So they left, and they came to the house of a woman. To be specific, she was a prostitute named Rahab. Now, I'm going to kind of dialogue, do a little dance with our reading today. Okay, so I'm going to bounce back and forth. Throughout history, theologians have tried to adjust the meaning of prostitute in these verses to mean an innkeeper. I would go out on a limb to say this, that those that have tried to convince others of that are intimidated at the places that God goes to reveal himself. They want to clean up the message of God. We want to make it cleaner and more tidy. I'm sorry, but there's nothing that I see of the God that we live for that minds filth. He doesn't get dirty, but he doesn't mind going to where the dirt is. She's a prostitute. She's a harlot. She's doing that. She's willingly giving herself to any man that would want her. She's a prostitute. Her name's Rahab. These spies from the children of Israel, who are the set-apart ones, the holy ones, go there. And I've got some theories on why they went there, and I'll share it. We'll get there in a minute. But those spies, they stayed there at her place. The king of Jericho was told, "Look, some of the Israelite men have come here tonight to investigate the land." Then the king of Jericho sent word to Rahab and said, "Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, for they came to investigate the entire land." Now, culturally speaking, the way groups of people, tribes, would go about conquering lands is they would send out spies to survey the land to see what they needed to do to eliminate food and water. If you can ruin their wells, and if you can ransack their fields and all this kind of stuff, then we can control their health, and they call that siege. This place is under siege, and so we're just going to eliminate the things that require them to live, and we'll just wait for them to die. So that's what they're doing. They're surveying the land. They're checking things out. But the woman had taken the two men and hidden them. I did a little bit of research on governing laws of the Canaanites. There's not a lot of material out there for it, but I did come across a theologian who explained a lot of the cultures of that day. What we are about to read of what Rahab does, it's called treason. She betrays and goes against her own people. It is believed that in this culture, that if you were guilty of treason, the authorities would cut off your hands and your feet, and they would pull out your eyes, and they would drag you through the city streets as a sign, don't do that. And so what she is doing isn't just like, I sure hope I don't get caught. No, what she's doing is literally life and death. The woman had taken the two men, the two spies, and hidden them. So she said, "Yes, the men did come to me, but I didn't know where they were from. At nightfall, when the gate was about to close, the men went out, and I don't know where they were going. Chase after them quickly, and you can catch up with them." But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them among the stalks of flax. And it's what she had arranged on the roof. The men pursued them along the road to the fords of the Jordan, and as soon as they left to pursue them, the gate was shut. Now let me expound on a few things. The stalks of flax. They did grow some flax in the region that they lived in, but the vast majority of the flax was brought in from other areas. It's believed that what they received was directly from Egypt. That was the main place where flax was grown and sent out from. So, coincidence over the last 40 years that they would be trading and sending and receiving stuff from Egypt? I would presume that in that 40 years, as tradesmen came into the town, that they would be telling stories of, Egypt is empty. This is crazy, and there's blood all over the doorposts, and it's just crazy. So I would imagine, and especially for her profession, people that would go all over the place, they lived a very, I don't know what kind of life you'd explain it as, maybe not deep convictions, and so they just went out to get stuff and brought it back, and then shacking up with a prostitute wasn't abnormal. And so who knows what conversations were had, or who knows what conversations Rahab heard throughout her life in her profession. But what we do know is that the majority of the flax that was brought to the region was from Egypt. And then the importance of the gate being shut, let me draw a picture of Jericho. At the time, especially when people started to see the children, 3 million people making their way to the region. The farmers and the people on the outskirts of the town were like, oh snap, we got to do something. So they gathered up all of their crops and came inside, and they stored stuff ready to be under siege. And the walls of Jericho, there were 2 walls, the outer and the inner. The outer wall, the foundation alone, based upon what archaeologists have discovered, the foundation of the outer wall alone was 8 feet high. Then there was the wall, which was another 12 to 16 feet. Then there was this mound made out of plaster that rose up another 16 to 20 feet. Then there's another foundation and another wall on top of that. That's the definition of a fortified city. That's the significance of the gate being shut. Because once the gate is shut, you've got a 24-foot drop to the ground. So when the gate was shut, the spies who are now hidden in the stalks of flax, they're there. Before the men fell asleep, picking up in verse 8, before the men fell asleep, she went up on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given you this land. I also know that the terror of you has fallen on us. And I also know that everyone who lives in the land is panicking because of you. This is a prostitute, a pagan prostitute, declaring what she knows about this God who is bringing the children of Israel somewhere. It gets better. For we have heard. Does anybody remember the New Testament verse, faith comes by hearing? Okay. Rahab, a pagan prostitute, hearing the acts of God, seeing the contrast of people who worshipped Asherah and Baal and watching their confidence wane at a report, and seeing the difference of this nomadic group of people who are faithfully, blunderily following the one true God. We have heard how the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea, and He did that before you came out of Egypt. We also heard what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 Amorite kings you completely destroyed on the other side of the Jordan. When we heard this, we lost heart, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. Now, please swear to me by the Lord that you will also show kindness to my family because I showed kindness to you. Give me a sure sign. That's a good one to circle, highlight, whatever you want to do. A sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father, mother, brothers, sisters, and all who belong to them, and save us from impending death. The men answered, we will give our lives for yours. I didn't spell this out in the first service, but do you know what that sounds like to me? It sounds like wedding vows. I remember my wedding day, and I remember giving my life to Summer, my life to her. Y'all want to know something crazy? It's believed that one of the 2 spies eventually married Rahab. It gets even crazier at the end of the story. They answered her, we will give our lives for yours. If you don't report our mission, we will show kindness and faithfulness to you when the Lord gives us the land. I got to say, y'all, I don't talk like that as much as I would like to. There is no question in their verbiage. There is no question in their tone. We're going to show you kindness and faithfulness when the Lord gives us the land. Are you that confident with your life? Are you that confident of God in your life when you can say when, not if? That's a game changer for your life, when you can march forward in your life and say, when God does this, not if God does this. It's tremendous. It's huge. We can approach life confidently. And we don't have our confidence waning. We're just like, I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't even know who it's going to be done through. I just know that my God is bigger than what I'm facing. And when it happens, we're going to show you kindness and faithfulness. She let them down by a rope through the window, since she lived in a house that was built into the wall of the city. The wall was so thick, y'all, that people would make homes in the wall. They would make homes so the outside of the wall would be the outer wall of their home. And she let them down by a rope. I think if she's got flax drying on her roof, there's a couple of things that were made out of flax. The finer particles of flax, actually the young flax that would be harvested early, it was used for very, very soft linen. The more mature, ripened stalks of flax would be used for rope. Now, what I'm about to say isn't in the Bible. I just like to not make the Bible so one-dimensional. Sometimes we can just read it like this just happened, but we need to look at stuff on the peripheral. We don't have any idea why Rahab became a prostitute. Maybe she wanted to start up a business of her own, and maybe she wanted to get into fabrics and stuff like that, and so it started that way. But maybe business wasn't good and she had to trade favors for materials. And so what started as a rope and material business ended up being a prostitution business on the side, or in addition to. But I think it's interesting to think about her making the rope and having no idea that one day she will be lowering God's chosen people, spies, the set-apart ones, lowering them out of her home. Now, here's why I think they landed in Rahab's home. Because when she was a little girl, growing up, I mean, in the story it says that she's a woman, so that could be anywhere from 18 on, 16 on. I bet you she already heard some of the stories that had taken place in Egypt. Those stories would have included blood poured out over doorposts and lintels. Those stories would have included the crossing of the Red Sea. I wonder if she went into the business thinking, okay, somebody's got purple taken care of, they've got yellow. I want to have my trade be red material. And as the spies are going into Jericho and they're thinking, where can we lay up for the evening? Red has been significant for our life. Let's go land there. It's got red kind of draping out over windows, and she's got red dye all over the place. Let's go there. And she's a prostitute. Well, maybe we can go there inconspicuously. She lowers them down. Well, she gets acquainted with these spies pretty quickly, learning that they are part of the children of Israel. And the attachment to them happens so quickly that she's willing to lie against her own people. And so she let them down by a rope through the window, since she lived in a house that was built into the wall of the city. She says, "Go into the hill country so that the men pursuing you won't find you," she said to them. "Hide yourselves there for 3 days until they return. Afterward, go on your way." The men said to her, "We will be free from this oath." They struck a covenant. They struck an agreement. These men, spies for the Most High God, struck an agreement with a pagan prostitute. Y'all like juicy stories? This is juicy. Do you know how church people would have responded had they known? "Oh, my goodness, what are they doing in there?" "Well, I'll tell you what they're doing in there. What business do those holy men have to do in the house of a prostitute? How dare they deface God that way?" "We will be free from this oath you made us swear unless we enter the land and you tie this scarlet cord to the window through which you let us down. Bring your father, mother, brothers, and your father's family into your house. If anyone goes out the doors," does this sound familiar from last Sunday? "If anyone goes out the doors of your house, his blood will be on his own head, and we will be innocent. But if anyone with you in the house should be harmed, his blood will be on our heads. And if you report our mission, we are free from this oath you made us swear." So then she says, "Let it be as you say," she replied, and she sent them away. And after they had gone, she tied the scarlet cord to the window. What's crazy about this story is Paul in the New Testament and James, the brother of Jesus, in the same conversation, both of them talk about Father Abraham, and in the same breath, Rahab. Father Abraham, whose descendants would outnumber the stars, who would be held in high regard. And Rahab, a prostitute, because of their faith. So she's letting them down. And it says this, right before the conversation happens, she goes, "What sign will you give me?" What sign? So she's letting them down out of the window, right? She lets them down. And mid-swing, they look up at her and they say, "Tie this around your window." Kind of looks like this, right? Tie this around your windows. That's your sign. Go. Tell your family. Tell your family that when we come to stay with you and we're going to keep you safe. Now, she's a prostitute, y'all. I'm pretty sure her family was like, I don't know. I don't know what the relationship was like. But after this conversation, she goes to her family and she's like, "Hey, y'all need to stay with me because in a couple of days or in a matter of time, the children of Israel are coming and they promised me and I promised them. I promised I wouldn't tell that they were here, but I'm telling you, come live with me, be in my house, and then when the city goes down, they're going to make sure that we're okay." "Okay, Rahab, sure. Go on with your filthy business. Go on and be the prostitute. Go on with your bad self. Go on." I'm going to push pause for a second. A rope is such a common thing, right? It's such a common thing. So let's just unpack that for a second. Something so common, made by and in the hands of a social outcast, saves the lives of spies. Y'all want to know something crazy? Rahab would eventually become the great, 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 great grandmother of Jesus. So when I hear conversations about people having issues with the song of Reckless Love, and not just here, but even on the internet, people have trouble with the song Reckless Love. Y'all, Rahab, the story is reckless love. You can't get any more reckless than that. God saved his people at the hands of a prostitute, and that prostitute would become related to Jesus. God's not afraid of it. And what we have a tendency of doing is I just look at the tattoos on that person. I cannot believe that they are living that way. That's what's become socially acceptable. It's not accepted in the church, but that couple's living that way. Stop it. I'm not in agreement with it, but that's not our business. We're not about the finger-pointing business. We're about the miraculous work of God. Gee, many Christmas. What we make things infuriates me sometimes. A prostitute brought deliverance and safety to some spies that belonged to the house of God. And true to their word, when the smoke or the dust started to stir up in the distance, and they're like, "Oh snap!" They're moving. They're not just moving. They're coming. Whatever the alarm was that needed to be sounded for the city of Jericho, everybody flocks to the city. They seal up the gate, and Rahab's probably like, "Mom, Dad, come on! Look, they're coming. I told you, get in my house. I've got the cord hanging out the window. We're good." Day one, the city of Jericho will see soldiers and then trumpeters and then this box being carried by priests that they have no idea what that is, but it seems important because it's in the middle, followed by another set of soldiers, and they march around the city. The only noise we hear are the trumpeters. Then they go back. Well, that was weird. That's it? That's all they got? Whatever. Day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, the same thing. Day 7, a little bit different. They go around the city 7 times. And then after the 7th pass, they erupt in a shout that has probably never been heard like again. And the walls of the city crumble. Joshua sends in the same 2 spies to where Rahab's house is, and they retrieve not only her, but her family, because they believed in the security that could be found in this distinguishing mark. This symbol that symbolized blood. Covering. Imagine how awkward some of those conversations were. "Hey guys, go take over Jericho." And then after the dust settles, they're like, "So what did you do beforehand? You weren't like a woman priest or nothing? Oh, you're a prostitute. Okay. I'm sure that was a little strange, right? Welcoming her into the fold." Some people in here might be like, "Well, did that all really happen?" Okay, well, there's some seriously smart people called archaeologists, okay? And throughout hundreds of years, they've done some uncovering. Listen how crazy this is. The command was, go to that city and don't leave anything. Destroy it completely. Now, it might sound brutal because God says destroy everything, man, woman, child, everything. Remember, they lived for sex gods, and they did unthinkable, unimaginable things as worship. Archaeologists have found that in this 9-acre plot of land that made up the city of Jericho, that throughout the whole plot of land, there is a 3-foot deep layer of ash. They have also found vats and containers for their day that were chock full of food. They're uncovering these things. So what that means is the siege that the people of Jericho were preparing for, they didn't even have a chance to eat the food that they had stocked up because their siege only lasts 7 days, and then ruin came on the city. Not only this, okay, this is nuts. On the north side of the city wall, there remains a section of the wall standing that faces northward to the hill country that the spies were sent. I wonder whose house that belongs to. Shut the front door. This is like archaeological uncoverings, y'all. It begins with red. It begins with this girl who was raised in a home and for whatever reason finds herself in the business of prostitution, and she also made material that was red. I almost wonder if her, like I said, I wonder if her passion for red started with the stories that she heard about the children of Israel. Nonetheless, she starts making red material, red rope, not knowing that one day she would be lowering men of God, not knowing that one day she would be marrying one of the spies, not knowing that one day that she would be of the lineage of our Savior. Can we do something, church? Can we stop being busy about the wrong, stupid things? Where was this found? In the home of a prostitute. That means that which is common, God calls profound. He has profound purpose for the things that are common, and the common things are going to be found in unthinkable, unimaginable, dirty places. Are we going to be more focused on the things that we don't approve of? Or will we be more focused on, Father, help me understand and help me see how you have covered me, how you have set me free, how you have spared me. By the way, some of you are like, okay, you've been doing this whole red thing. Where's the red at? In chapter 6, this is what it says in chapter 6, that Joshua spared, S-P-A-R-E-D, Joshua spared the prostitute Rahab. Joshua also is a version of Jesus, by the way. So if you want to take some liberties there, Jesus spared Rahab. So the question's a weird one this week. And if you're not feeling it, I won't be offended, but the question is, what are you doing with the rope? The symbol of covering, the symbol of salvation, the symbol of being spared. What do you do with this?